Today on Adversity to Strength, I'm joined by Michelle Rosenthal, a trauma recovery specialist whose personal and professional journey makes her one of the leading voices in the field. Michelle is a board certified hypnotist with a speciality in trauma and PTSD, a master neurolinguistic programmer, and a certified professional coach. She's also the acclaimed author of several books, including Your Life After Trauma: Powerful Practices to Reclaim Your Identity and Heal Your PTSD, Dynamic Strategies That Work, recently released with the new title Your Brain is a Safe Space: How to Stop Trauma and PTSD from Controlling Your Life. But Michelle's expertise is rooted in her own lived experience. After surviving a rare illness as a teenager, she endured decades of post-traumatic stress before finding her way to healing. That transformation inspired her to dedicate her life to helping others. Today, she's an internationally recognized speaker, author, and media contributor, featured on platforms including NPR, PBS, and Psychology Today. In this episode, Michelle shares her remarkable journey from illness and PTSD to healing and empowerment, and offers practical strategies for reclaiming your identity, rewriting your story, and creating a life beyond trauma. Michelle, it's an absolute honor to have you come on the podcast today.
Lee, I'm so happy to be here. I love you already. I just, in the few moments that we spent off camera, it's just, you're my people. So
I'm
let's
happy with
talk.
that. Thank you so much. Take me back to the beginning of your journey. Where did everything start for you? Because it's a long journey for you.
Yeah, it's a long journey, and let's bottom line it, right? Let's get to the meat of what really matters. So I think anybody who's listening understands that as kids, we really don't have coping mechanisms for anything. And that's where the story begins because lots of things happen and we're totally fine. We learn how to absorb it. We watch the people around us and we develop our relationships and reactions to stress. And then for people like you and me and a lot of your listeners, something really big happens that completely overwhelms everything that we understand about how to navigate the world. And for me, that happened when I was 13. And I had just a routine infection and I was given a routine antibiotic. And what happened after that was not routine at all. And basically, what they didn't know at the time that I was allergic to this medication. It runs
Right.
in my family. My grandmothers had not disclosed that they were both allergic to this. The doctor suspected I was, but didn't mention it to my parents. And so it was a mess. And what essentially happened is this medication turned me into a full body burn victim inside and out. And I spent weeks in a quarantine burn unit hospital room in New York City. And so, I mean, over 40 years later, I look fine. But, you know, when you come through an experience that completely overwhelms your ability to cope, from the terror, nobody knew what was happening to me. Doctors didn't know it. There was no treatment for what was happening. Today, they immediately put these patients into a coma and they don't bring them out until it's over. And I think
Cool.
probably that's better. I don't think you would end up with PTSD because you don't remember any of it. But
Yeah.
for me, I came out of the hospital knowing I was going to make a physical recovery. I've got scars, but nothing that would impede me from living an okay life. But I was very clear, and I wonder, Lee, if you have this moment, did you ever have a moment when you knew I am completely different than who I was before this happened to me?
I think for me, because of the trauma that I endured from the early age, I kind of never knew anything different. And the only thing
Mhm.
that was different for me was probably when I started going to therapy and recognizing it. There wasn't that one moment. It was just a gradual. So it's not until I realized it, then I was like, all right, now I know why.
And that's exactly, I'm so glad that you said that because I was hoping you would say that because that's to me, you know, we all think like if I don't have this story, like a particular story, we all think I can't heal, right? But I've worked with so many people who have my story where like I knew there was a moment where I was never going back to who I was before. And then I've worked
Yeah.
with so many people who are like, I never had that moment. The abuse started from the moment I got here. And that's okay too. healing comes with both stories. And that's why I wanted
Yeah.
to start there, because I think we can start with our trauma stories. And certainly, I mean, I can go into the details of mine, but we all have our horrible moments. I think the most
Yeah.
important moments are the moments where we're able to say, okay, here's where we begin. And the beginning is, I knew I was different. You knew that's who you'd always been. And both of us
Yeah.
then had to get to a moment where things were so bad, we decided to become someone new.
Yeah. I think
That's the healing is, don't you
for
think?
me, I don't know about yourself, but I always never felt quite right. I had lots of friends, I was amongst people, but things never quite fitted. And I never understood why, and I struggled to figure things out. But now I know where it comes from awful parents. Um, but then once you start working on yourself, you then start understanding why you've got that belief system there as well. What about yourself? How did you kind of start working on
Yeah,
yourself?
I think you're right. I think for a long time, there's that feeling of something's not right about me. When I came out of the hospital and I got home, I just wanted to pretend nothing had ever happened. And I had a near-death experience while I was in the hospital. So I was grappling not just with the fear, the pain, the terror, the panic. I had some just horrific experiences, medically speaking. But then to have this near death experience, there was no Google. I couldn't like start Googling what the hell was that. And when I tried to like describe it or express it to my family, they were not open to that kind of experience. It just was not a
Yeah.
part of what their perspective was. So I had nobody to talk to about like I left and now I'm back and I didn't want to come back and now like I don't feel like I'm wholly back in this body. Now I who do I talk to about that? So
Yeah.
like I had all of that going on while I was completely, symptoms of PTSD start after 30, they're diagnosable after 30 days.
Yeah.
But, in 1981, when this happened to me, nobody was looking at a civilian kid with medical trauma as a PTSD candidate. I
No.
just became a difficult teenager and I was an artist. So then I grew up and I was a temperamental artist. Like there were labels for my bad behavior, but none of them were accurate. So,
Yeah.
and I hid a lot of my, I tried to hide. Um, the anxiety that I felt, or the hypervigilance, or the weird idiosyncratic things I started, like the compulsive, like kind of OCD things that I started to do. And I didn't know why. I just knew that it made me feel safer to do these weird things.
Yeah.
And then that devolved into a full blown eating disorder and a recurring nightmare and just, mood swings and like, your basic DSM-5 list of PTSD symptoms that nobody identified until I had a massive meltdown at the age of 29.
Yeah.
And that's when 17 years later, 17 years went by. I didn't talk about what had happened or how I felt about it. I pretended nothing had happened and that it had zero effect on me. But I couldn't hold a job. I couldn't maintain a relationship.
Yeah.
Your classic stuff. So you asked that it was like this total meltdown at 29 got me into therapy 17 years after I actually needed it.
What was the cause of the meltdown? Was it, I mean, it's a build up anyway. Was there a trigger or just overwhelmed?
Yeah, there was a trigger. I just didn't understand any of this at the time. I lived in New York City. I had built a life. I never slept. I slept about 1 hour a night, two if I was lucky. And so I built a life in New York City. I actually had a job that made me be out all night. And then I had to be in the office at 8 a.m. again the next day. So I built a life around, I was an insomniac and I made that work. And I think a decade of that, almost a decade of that, um, my body was just exhausted first of
Of
all,
course.
and I ended up with a sinus infection. I went to a doctor, and you can imagine being in a doctor's office just terrified me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was not very good at communicating back then. And this doctor wanted to give me an antibiotic. And of course, I was terrified. And I said to him, please, like, isn't there anything else we can do? I'm very sensitive. I have this history. And he made fun of me and sent me out of the office with this antibiotic that was not a good fit for me and did not trigger the same illness, but triggered like my whole body. I think it started probably with a psychological trigger, but when I took the antibiotic, my body just like revolted and I never recovered. It was awful. So that sent me on this cascade of events where I ended up being fired from my job because I couldn't show up consistently.
Too
And
tired.
I'm sorry.
Were you just too tired to show up?
Well, the thing is, Lee, I couldn't eat anything. So I was exhausted. I ended up with fibromyalgia. I ended up with chronic fatigue syndrome. And
Of
I ended up
course.
with a GI issue where the only thing I could eat was a white potato. Like, you just can't exist with, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, and white potatoes.
Yeah, no, no.
So I kept like saying I needed medical leave, and then we would set a date for me to come back, and I just couldn't get out of
Yeah,
bed. And
yeah,
they eventually were like, we're just going to replace you. Good luck.
yeah,
So that sent me to a bunch of specialists. I just bounced around Manhattan for a year or two looking for somebody to help me. I went to, something was wrong with my liver. I'm not a drinker, but my liver wasn't okay. My stomach was okay. I was in the hospital doing all these tests. It was a mess. And it was the mess that drove me to therapy because I really thought I was going to die. I couldn't eat anything and nobody could figure out what was wrong or how to help me. And here's the trigger, right? Because that was exactly what happened in 1981. I took an antibiotic, it wrecked my body, nobody knew how to help me, and I almost died. So now
yeah,
I'm back. It's funny how the brain will recreate the same experience over and
yeah.
over, right?
It's that flashbulb memory. It doesn't want you in that situation. You know yourself. It'd do everything it can to get you as far away, fight or flight, as quick as it can. Did
Very true.
did you did you know when you were going through all this? Because you've like built your life around dealing with this issue, but did you know that that's where it's come from, or were you're not sure?
Not sure. I like full on, first of all, full on denial. um, Second of all, I couldn't talk about what had happened to me. Like, I talk about it now. I've written an award nominated book about
Ah,
it. Like,
yeah,
I
yeah,
talk all the time about what happened. But back then, I really, like, the image in my mind was, if I speak about what happened, you're going to have to put me in a straitjacket, because I felt so wild and crazy inside. I couldn't handle the emotions around the event. And you know what, Lee? When I was in the hospital before I left, my mother had the forethought to bring a psychiatrist to my room, because she knew, she watched, she was there, she saw the whole thing, she knew what had happened to me. And my mom was like, nobody can go through something like this without support, like therapy. You're going to need therapy. And this is, you can argue this point with me, but I have a mixed feelings about the therapeutic process, because it did not serve me at all. And maybe times have changed, but I really wish therapists were more proactive about helping people. And maybe they are today. Maybe they are. So let me say that with
What
a
what
caveat.
what year was this that you were seeing a therapist that you first
Well,
started?
1981, was when my trauma occurred. And so my
Yeah.
mom brought this psychiatrist into my hospital room the day before I was released.
So
And
in
I
1981.
yeah, I was 13. Like, we know now that neurologically, trauma affects your hippocampus. It
Yes.
affects your ability to, sort and place your memories appropriately. It affects your language area. It affects how your emotions and your language match up. Like, we know all this now. What I can tell you is, in 1981, I could not put words to the feelings that
Yeah.
I had. And so this psychiatrist came in and she was like, let's talk about what happened to you. And I refused. There was like, I thought my head would explode. Like, the only way I was holding it together was that I can't speak about this. I will
Hmm.
not speak about this. And so for 45 minutes, hospital rooms have those TVs up in the corner. I watched a cartoon for 45 minutes while this woman just sat next to my bed because I refused to speak. And I wrote about this in my first book, my memoir. How different would my life have been if she had talked to me? Like, okay, I wouldn't talk to her, but if she had said to me, look, you've just been through something that people shouldn't have to go through.
It's
And
the obvious
going
thing to do.
forward, right? Like, why didn't she educate me or acknowledge and validate what happened to me? And
Yeah.
what would happen to all of us as survivors if someone just did that for us?
So, as a therapist, the way I work, I'm very blunt and to the point. I'll only ever
Yeah.
be honest. I can't do the fluffy stuff. That's not me. Okay.
Oh,
So,
awesome.
one of the ways that I work is I'm psychoeducational because I can get results for clients, fine, but I don't want my client to leave going, well, I feel better, but I don't know why. So I'll always
Mm.
explain things, how it affects the brain. If you go through this set of circumstances, this is why you're going to feel that way. That's how I work. I'll get the results there as well. A lot of people, especially at the start, don't know where to start. So then if I find, especially in the early sessions, if I'm explaining things to them and give them an example, gives them ideas, oh, well, that makes sense. I understand that. And they start building confidence. It makes all the difference. And if you just, the first session, they're really shy, they're really nervous, don't know what to say, and then you sat in silence. What's the point?
Right? Oh, Lee, I knew there was a reason I love you because I work with people who come to me and you know what therapists are telling them? Like therapists who use EMDR, for example. I had a client who came to me and she said, I'm a total failure at healing. I don't know if you're going to be able to help me. And I said, why would you say that? And she said, well, I worked with a therapist who told me in our third session, since I wasn't healed and we were using EMDR, there was something wrong with me and it couldn't be fixed. And I was like, oh my God, like I can't imagine saying that to somebody because
You would never you would. I've got clients where, and from my own personal experience, my
yeah.
therapist is probably more blunt than me. She's brilliant, but she's
Mm,
like, Lee, the trauma you've been through is irreversible. You will never recover from it, but you already know that. So what we're going to do is just keep working on it step by step, bit by bit, and you're going to make improvements, small marginal gains. And in a year's time, 6 months' time, look at the progress. I'm like, all right, I'll take that.
yeah.
You tell somebody that they've got irreversible damage, or they can't be fixed, it's your fault there. It's just like, why am I even here? Why do I bother? And who knows where that's going to send them spiraling to. It's terrible for that to happen.
It is. It's so unfair. And to me, we all have healing potential.
Of
You
course.
just have to learn how to access it. And for all of us, I mean, I like to say I did the alphabet when I was healing because I did 5 years of talk therapy. So, at the age of 30, in this total free fall meltdown of my life, I went into therapy not to talk about my trauma. I went to talk. I just couldn't function. I was so terrified that I was going to die and that I was this chronic patient that's what I went to therapy for. But the reason you go into therapy is never the reason you go into
Yes,
therapy,
exactly.
right?
It's the one that's just underneath.
Right.
Always. Yeah.
So we got there, and we started to talk about my trauma, and I learned to tell my story, which I think is the biggest benefit of the therapeutic process, to be able to learn to own your story, and that you're not going to die by doing it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I think it's we all have one of the most interesting things I learned was for so long I thought I was crazy. Like I didn't know I had PTSD. So all of my symptoms, I just kept saying, Michelle, you're crazy. Some people in this world all are crazy. You're an artist. So it really kind of works to your benefit. Be just as good crazy as you can be.
Yeah.
And that was the life that I was trying to lead. And then you get into the healing process and you realize I'm not crazy, but we're all universal in our our experience of PTSD. Like we're all individual in our trauma, and then
Yeah.
we're universal in the experience of the symptoms.
Yes. Yes.
And then we're completely individual in our healing process. So just because
Yeah.
you and I have flashbacks, for example, how you get rid of your flashbacks and how I get rid of my flashbacks, two totally different
Yeah.
ways, right?
Yeah.
So that was the biggest thing that I learned in my healing was like some things, 5 years of talk therapy made me able to tell my story, but I was way more depressed after 5 years of therapy than I was before I went into therapy. Like I was not any closer to being like okay or functional in a sustainable way. So I dropped out of therapy and I started doing every alternative thing I could find. And that's what I mean. I did the alphabet. I did TFT, TAT, EMDR, TFT. Like I did all of it. And like little by little, like you were saying, like you just cobble together small wins long enough
Yeah.
until like, I don't know about you. I got to a moment where I found like the thing that was like a cannon and I just shot over the rest of recovery over the finish line. Did you get that or is it like all incremental?
I I found that there would be sessions where it would be changed my life where I've had two therapists that have been brilliant, and my first therapist, I couldn't understand why I had this like black hole, this like void, this like sort of
Mm.
Sunday night feeling. I've got school in the morning feeling, and
Oof.
and I was like, oh, yeah, I'm driving back, and and I've got this feeling, and I've got my heartbreaker playlist on, and I can't understand why I'm feeling so low. And she
Mm.
explained that it was sadness because I was brought up in a loveless childhood. So my inner child never received the love that it should have done. So, and it's always, as you know, the inner child, it's always searching, it's always trying to find
Mm.
it, and it would come and go. And when she explained it to me, it's almost like that weight and pain kind of just disappeared because I got an answer. And
Yeah.
one of the things I find in therapy is that if you find the answer to something, and you can't always, but a lot of times you can, that can make all of the difference. Ah, right, I now know where it comes from. It gives me something to work with. So that was one of the times that really stands out for me that made a big difference to me.
Yeah. I think that's really powerful because also what you're talking about is, that switch from asking why to asking what. Like,
Yeah.
not why do I feel like this, but what's happening that I
Yeah.
feel this way
Yes.
is. And so I don't know about you, but in my practice, I outlaw that little word why. Like I don't want to have it in any conversation because it just opens a loop that's never actually satisfied. There's always another reason
Yes.
why or another reason why.
Yeah.
I really like the what questions, the how questions, those answers that nail process and strategy within ourselves and a thought process that you can say, oh, well, that's just an old thought I keep having, for example,
Yeah.
like what you're saying, or that's just like an old habit that I'm creating. And then you don't need to like really go down the rabbit hole of why, but it's like, what do I do about that
Yeah.
instead?
Yeah.
That's a
And
neat
it's,
moment that you described.
and especially when you know the answer now. That,
Yeah.
because what I find, and I would have done it myself in therapy, is if, especially if somebody's been through a trauma caused by somebody else, they
Mhm.
ask why me, why did I deserve this, why did, and that can be really stressful. And it's, I get it, I understand it, but it's like, forget that, because you'll go
Yeah.
round in a loop and you'll be there forever. This isn't
Yeah.
about you. This is about other people, and they've deliberately made a choice to do that to you. It wasn't an accident. There's your answers. It is what it is. Let's deal with it now. How can we deal with this? What can we do? Tell me how you feel and where do you feel it? That kind of thing. So try and get them to shift it from there, because otherwise we'll be there forever, and then we can move on. Let's deal with that.
Absolutely. I totally agree. In my own process, when I look back, and now this is the way that I always position it with people that I work with or just people that I'm educating. I think there are three phases, if you will, to the trauma recovery process, generally speaking, that can be applied universally. And I when I approach the whole process of working with somebody or educating a survivor about, just because I'm you meet people all the time, you're chatty, I'm chatty, I'm like, if I can help educate a person on a street corner, I will. So
Yeah.
I always say, like, look, there are three phases. Okay, the first is you have to create control, because until we start to feel like we're in control, we're not going to be able to heal, because it's that out of control feeling of being in danger that creates these repetitive habits that we have that are PTSD symptoms, right? So phase one, control. You have to set an intention for how you want to, who you want to be, how you want to feel. You have to decide how you're going to systematically approach that. And then you have to really figure out how you're going to learn to self-regulate. Because until we learn to self-regulate, it's even hard just to work with someone who's trying to help you, don't you think?
Self-regulate, it's very hard. It's something it's a daily battle for me. I have something I have to
Yeah.
work harder all the time. Reflect on how you're feeling. Is this feeling how I'm my thoughts and feelings? Is this accurate?
Mhm.
Is this causing my CPTSD? Do I really? It's exhausting because you're questioning. Am I happy about this? Am I not happy? Am I unhappy because it's a trauma that's related to this, or is it because I generally don't like it, or do it's exhausting? But in order to be able to regulate yourself, you have to stay on top of it and be consistent as you can, and you just have to work harder. That's how I found it.
You do. And you know what helped me the most is going to the science of it,
Yeah.
because I can be very in my head. I think all of us with PTSD, we get very in our head and very disconnected on the physical level. And which doesn't mean we don't feel stuff physically. I just mean like we are not grounded so much in our physical control as our mind is always like, where's the danger? Where's the danger? How do I be
Yeah,
safe?
yeah,
And so for me, learning meditation, which was a battle, because it's very hard to sit still and be quiet in your own body with PTSD or your own mind. But that and breath work
yeah,
really, because you can. I leaned into the science of, okay, meditation and breath work. When you put those two things together, which is how I was taught, um, that's science. Like, I don't have to try to create the outcome of what happens when I
yeah,
change and control the way I'm breathing. My body automatically knows what that means. My neurological cascade of, you know, chemicals changes, that goes down into my body. My body receives those messages. I could be thinking something insane, and if I breathe right, my body will not respond to what I'm thinking. It will respond to the rhythm and the peace that the parasympathetic activation is creating, and then that'll come around and loop back to like settle my brain. And it's funny because I had a client um, text me from an airplane last night, not last night, yesterday afternoon, that she was
yeah,
on a flight and she was terrified.
yeah,
And she was like, I'm doing the breathing you taught me. I can't believe it. It works. And I'm like,
yeah,
of
yeah.
course it works. It's science.
Yeah. I've had the same conversation. Somebody I'm about to get on to. Leon, I'm on Leon, I know it's your day off, but I'm about to get on a plane and what should I do? I'm like, the breathing. Always start with a breathing exercise. It lowers the
Yeah.
heart rate, it lowers the anxiety. Just keep doing that. I even tell them to do the breath exercises without feeling stressed. Just get into the habit.
Yes.
Habit is
Yes.
everything. That becomes part of you. Always, no matter what, always start with breathing exercises. Always.
And I love that. Lee, you just brought such a good point, because so often we all feel like, well, I'll do the thing I'm supposed to do in the moment that I need it. But that is a
Too
high
late.
stress moment.
It's too
And
late
that is not an
sometimes.
easy moment to practice something you don't have facility for. So
Yeah,
I love that
yeah,
advice that you give.
yeah. With me, I'm very much about habits. I'm like, look, therapy is just a lot of habits. That's it. Belief system habits, and that's how we work there. Good habits, bad habits. Yeah.
Mm.
If so, get into the habit of reducing your heart rate, bringing down your anxiety, even when you don't, because the more you do that, the more it becomes part of you, the more it becomes part of a habit, and it's easier to remember. You're not going to forget because it's a habit, and that's going to help you when you do need it as well. So I always try to get people, but that's all I go on about is habits and belief
I love
system.
that. I've never actually heard anybody talk about it like that. I think that's brilliant. I love that idea.
There's a very good book called Making Habits, Breaking Habits. It's a really, really good book. And it basically says everything. It's just that everything we do in life is a habit. Every, we will tell ourselves that it's not. So if you decide you got two ways to walk around the park to get to the exit, there's a pond and you decide that you're going to walk where the pond is. And also, how come you walk that way every day? Oh, because there's the pond there and there's the ducks. The reality isn't, it's because you've chose that way and it's become a habit and you always go that way. It's just a habit. It's really
Yeah.
fascinating. It's really interesting there. So yeah, I use that a lot.
It is, and if we relate that back to PTSD, it's just a habit too. It's
Yeah,
something really big happened, and you created a bunch of reactions to it, and now you just have not you, we habituate those reactions over and over and over. I
yeah,
always felt. Did you feel like this? I always felt like I was an athlete. This is when I had PTSD. I felt like I was an athlete preparing for the next event. Like I was going to be ready. The next trauma that came, I was on it. I was going to see it. I was going to manage it. I was going to be lean and strong and ready for it. And that just meant I engaged in all my PTSD habits
yeah,
like 10x
yeah,
because
yeah,
I
yeah,
was like really thinking they were going to be useful. It was like twisted way of thinking, but it's like the backside of habits, right? That's the
yeah,
shadow side. Like the
yeah,
habits
of
can
course.
serve us when we're healing, and they can really break us when we're not.
And it was the same for me for years. And the problem I had is that I was never in the moment. I was
Yeah.
never enjoying things. I'm too busy thinking about what I'm, even if it's like I've got work at the weekend or next week, or I've got this, I've got that. So I was never enjoying the things that I should have done. Too busy thinking about other things there. And I now know where that's come from. So I do my best to be in that moment. It's still hard, but right, let's make the
Yeah.
most of it. So if I'm like at a concert, I don't get my phone out. I'm not taking pictures. I'm at one or two, and then that's it. So when there's like I went to see the Eagles last year, and I just was in the moment, made the most of it. I didn't care about taking videos, and I'll watch it later because it's never the same. So I just made sure I was in the moment there. And for me, that's a great achievement because for years I was too busy focusing on what's next, which I now know is your fight and flight responses.
That's such a fascinating point, I think. I wonder sometimes, do you think we were predisposed? Because I'm like that too. I have to really work hard to be in the present moment, like really work hard. And even now, like I don't have PTSD symptoms, but I'm just so used to thinking in the future that, like, I was saying to my VA this morning, I'm like, here's the deal. Like, I am always in the future. It's your job to keep me in the present, like where we focus on what we're doing here. Like
Yeah.
you're the one who's supposed to like create the micro tasks for me so that I can be in the future and bring back the vision of where we're going. But do you think, Lee, that we were kind of already that way personality wise at birth?
Yeah, I think for me, from the research I've done, our brain's not evolved in 200,000 to 300,000 years. So
Yeah.
it's our brain for me is designed just to keep us alive at all
Right.
costs. You know yourself, it's easier to be in depression to be in a really good mood. Your brain, if it could, would have you as depressed as possible, fetal position under a blanket in a cave. You might be depressed, but you're not going to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. This kind
Very
of the
true.
analogy that I say. And also, a lot of people will stay in toxic relationships. They won't leave. And it's like, this guy's terrible for you. Why don't you just leave? No, I don't want to leave. Because your brain's going, well, you might be miserable. This guy might be awful for you, but who knows what's out there? So at least you're safe. So let's stay in this relationship there. And again, it's a habit, it's a pattern, it's a belief system there as well.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Very true. I love this conversation because I think it normalizes PTSD and trauma to an extraordinary extent. And I think that's part of the hardest path of the survivor is the silo nature of it, that we feel so disconnected from what's quote unquote normal. And we don't realize what we're experiencing after trauma is normal after a trauma, right?
So one of the things that I say to my clients is it doesn't take a lot for a person to suffer a trauma. It's a lot less than what you think. Because a lot of people come to me straight away, I know that they're going to have trauma. They've been through this, you can't not have. And they're expecting it to be like a war zone or something to
Mhm.
suffer a trauma. And I said, it could be something that you look at and is small, but it's had such an effect on you, it's give you a level of trauma. So don't assume and don't do a like for like. Yeah, but somebody down the road, they've been through this and I haven't. I was like, wait, does that make you feel any better? Well, no, it's not. I said, so it's kind of irrelevant what somebody else is going through on paper. Just focus on yourself. That's it.
100%. I had a podcast for several years, and I interviewed Judy Crane. She's the founder of a big recovery center actually here in Florida, and she gave me a definition of trauma that changed how I practiced. It changed how I saw trauma completely, because I coming from the survivor side, I was like, trauma is really big, like this horrible thing happened, and unless you have this big horrible thing, and Judy said to me, no. She said that trauma, the base definition of trauma, is any experience that feels less than good.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's perfect. First of all, it's very simple. And second
Yeah.
of all, it speaks to how different we all are, right? I worked with a couple who had been in a car wreck. They walked away, they were okay. The car was totaled, the dogs had flown out the window. It was like terrifying for them. He would not get back in the car, and she
Yeah.
was ready to drive across the country. And they were having a hard time balancing their opposing responses to trauma. But I think it's a beautiful illustration of how we can have the same experience as someone else, but
Yeah.
based on who we are and our perspective, it's either a really traumatic thing or it's not. And that speaks to what you were
Yeah.
saying, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, there's certain things. If somebody's going to go through it, you're going to be affected. But there's other things that affect people in different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you soon find out. And I've dealt with people that suffered totally different traumas, or even same traumas in different ways. Right, that's not going to
Yes.
work for them. This is going to work for them. Let's do this. Let's do that. So you have to have a lot to work with because, as they say, one shoe doesn't fit all. No chance. You got to be flexible there as well. So,
Definitely. And I read an interesting statistic many, like over a decade ago, that up to 70% of all US adults will experience a trauma in their lifetime. And up to 20% of those people will end up with PTSD. I think those are very conservative numbers, but even
I
so.
was just about to say that.
Yeah. Because if you really look at the statistics, the way they're reported, they say like 8% of the people have PTSD. And I think that's a ridiculous number to publish, because you're not accounting for all the people that don't come forward, that
Yeah,
never get diagnosed, that, like I went
yeah,
almost 30 years without being diagnosed. I got into therapy and still wasn't diagnosed. So, um,
definitely.
but I think
So,
the reason I brought up that statistic was to show how big the pool of survivorship is.
yeah,
And I always think back to, like, what can we learn from people who didn't end up with PTSD? Like, I studied them while I was in recovery. Like, what are they doing differently than I'm doing? And what can I learn from them? And how do I implement what they're doing in a way that helps me move forward so that I can change? Because I essentially feel like trauma recovery is two things. It is all about getting over a trauma addiction. I felt addicted to trauma, and
yeah,
we can talk about that in part two.
yeah,
And the other thing was an identity crisis. I just didn't know who to be. If I wasn't a survivor, who was I?
yeah,
And without the answer to that, I could not heal. So
yeah. I agree.
it was a challenge.
Yeah. It's been brilliant talking to you, and I can't wait for part two.
Me too. Me too.